Cops have Reddit. What was the funniest thing you've seen someone do because they noticed you? I was at a traffic light, waiting to cross, and I saw this lady with her young son across the street. The kid was running around yelling and generally not listening to his mum. As I crossed the street I heard the mother say, "If you don't behave I'll ask the police uncle." Uncle? Lady, I'm like 23. To catch you. Look. He's here already. Kid stops dead in his tracks, looks at me, wordlessly bursts into tears and starts hugging his mother's leg. Mother gives me an apologetic smile. I'm trying not to giggle as I walk on. My dad and I both work for the same PD. This is his story, not minimum. The shift before he had a guy detained for misdemeanor warrants or something. Some junkie comes walking down the road, sees the flashing lights and a cop next to a open back door. He empties his pockets dumping a pipe, needles, and 5 grams of meth on the hood of his patrol car. He then spreads his legs and puts his hands on the car. My dad was shocked, let the other guy in the back go and took in the guy who just handed over his meth. Apparently not sleeping for 3 days makes you paranoid. I got dispatched to the lobby of the jail for a guy who wanted to make a report. Get there, familiar with the guy. He got out of jail 4 days ago and had been kicked out of a trailer he was staying in because the owner found meth pipes in it. When Jude went to jail, he wanted to let us know that the meth pipes weren't his in case it gets reported to us. Proceeds to tell me that while the pipes weren't his, he definitely does have a meth problem and did smoke a whole bunch of meth a little while ago. And if he finds the owner of the trailer he's going to kick his ass. Okay, well buddy, now you've confessed to being under the influence of meth and threatened to assault someone, so why don't you just go ahead and put your hand behind your back? Go to search him and a bag with a brown substance falls out of his pocket. Chuck, is that heroin? I don't know. Okay, if I field test it, is it going to come back positive for heroin? Lol, it looks like it will. Fair enough, bro. Right through that door. Maybe too late, but one day I was headed to my station at the end of shift, meaning I stare straight ahead and avoid getting any paperwork to make me stay late. I happened to be behind the same car for maybe 2 miles on the same road. We are sitting at a red light, and out of nowhere this dude runs it. Everyone at the intersection looks at me, so of course I stop the dude. Make contact and he can barely hand me his license, he's shaking so bad from being nervous. Ask why he's so scared, and he says he saw me behind him and he's on diversion for running a red light. Also ends up having weed in the car. This question reminds me of an experience I had as a kid. My friend, who was black, probably plays a role into how things panned out, was interested in becoming a DJ, so he invested a lot of money into amps, turntables, subwoofers, etc. He used the same equipment in his car as he did with his turntables and just powered them off a 12V power supply when using them outside his car. Well, we are sitting in his backyard and he's messing around with the turntables when a cop car just pulls up all slow. The backyard was separated from the alley by just a chain link fence. The cop in a suspicious voice says, "Hey, do you have a receipt for all that equipment?" And without missing a beat my friend claps back with, "Do you have a receipt for those shoes you're wearing?" And the cop just kind of nods, as if to say fair enough, and gets back in the car and leaves. One time at night I saw some teens at a scenic overlook smoking a joint. I quietly walked up behind them and was literally standing 3 feet above them. I waited until one of them took a big drag and then turned on my flashlight. Kid just died inside as he looked at me and stated, "Oh shit," while the smoke came out. It was hilarious to me. Laughed even harder while I took him to jail. Just kidding, I'll let them go. Laughed even harder while I took him to jail. Just kidding, I'll let them go. When the police here would catch us smoking in some random stoner spot, they'd usually just give us a bit of a lecture, dump our pot out, and toss our pipes, or whatever, and tell us to go home. This was the 90s. A few years ago, long before we became a legal state, I was in the hood at a friend's place and someone there had bought a large bag of herb. Apparently, a few people chipped in to get a bulk discount. Anyways, they have a scale, the bag, a tray, and some other random related stuff on the back of a car park right in front of the house, so they can divvy up their weed. Officer slowly drives by, stops right by the car, says, "Everybody alright here?" Everyone nods and says yup. Officer drives on. He wasn't worried about the pot, he just wanted to make sure whatever going on was going on peacefully. I worked for the campus police as a security officer in college. We had a small nature preserve opposite some of the dorms that was a popular smoking spot. The rules were that you can't have open flames and that you can't be there after dark, so we would patrol some of the more popular places where kids would smoke weed. Never cut a ticket or arrested anyone. I worked with a real cop, but I developed a tactic where I would casually discuss with my partner about the bears we had spotted in the reserve earlier in the week and wonder if they were going after those aggressively territorial skunks that had just moved in. It would work for about a semester, and the amount of people sparking up in the reserve would drop. Next semester, rinse and repeat. Spoiler, there were no bears, but there were some fat, lazy skunks that didn't care about humans. I'm not an officer, but one lovely summer day in downtown Seattle, my children and me were wandering around at Pike Place Market, riding the monorail, etc. They were roughly 4 and 5 at the time. A street artist had made my daughter a balloon crown with a big flower poking out the top. She was wearing it on her head when we passed by an alley, and it blew off into the street. It exploded piece by piece, with each piece echoing down the street like a gunshot. 2 street officers and 2 mounted officers, on horses, were there in the blink of an eye. They saw the balloon parts and realized what had happened. My daughter was crying, the officers were shaken but laughing, and this, being Seattle, Latland, prompted one officer to say that we owed them all a coffee. My daughter was sad to lose her hat, but the mounted officers let my children pet the horses, so everything worked out fine. Not a cop, but when I was much younger I was driving a 1994 Saturn SL1 that wasn't much of a car. No power, exhaust leaks, but it got me around. I pulled up next to a cruiser with a younger guy driving, and decided that for some reason I wanted to see what he would do. As we waited at the light, I revved the engine multiple times. He looks over at me with his sunglasses on, no smile, just stared. I returned his look. When the light turned green I punched the gas, and the car promptly took off at its maximum speed of 2.5 miles per hour. I looked over, and he was now laughing. Then he punched the gas, and blew me away. I kind of hope I gave him a laugh in a otherwise boring dangerous day. In not joking at all about this, as a teenager, I was sitting at a stoplight for a left turn in the middle of the night, all alone at like 2 AM, waiting for it to change. This cop comes from behind me, runs through the red light, then screeches to a stop most of the way through the intersection, and backs up to a stop next to me. It was seriously hard to hold back my laughter. I'm thinking he would have blown through it, but saw me, and decided he had to stop. It was hilarious. From that day on, I realized police are just normal folks. Not a cop, but a pretty funny thing happened when my husband and I took a road trip a few years ago. It was night, getting close to our destination, when we got pulled over. We weren't speeding or anything. Cop comes to the window. Hey, the light for your back license plate is out. Obviously we had no idea about this, and equally confused why we got pulled over for this. Husband asks, really, can I get out to check? Cop kinda stammers, oh okay. He gets out, goes to the back of the car and literally fonzes the plate, punched it, and the light turned back on. Cop laughs his ass off and tells him to get it checked out. We were on our way. No ticket. My father worked for the state police on the campus of a local college. An elderly couple came into his office complaining that someone had stolen a couple of lion statues from the end of their driveway. A couple of days later, he had to go over and see about a noise complaint at a small frat. When the frat bro opened the front door, my dad could plainly see the lions in question bookending their couch. He said, keep the music down and get those statues back to where they belong by tomorrow morning, boys, or I'll be back. Before he winked and turned around. They got put back. Not a cop, but when I was a kid my mom took me to an airport and there was an officer. Curious little rascal that I was. I saw his weapon holstered at his hip. Incidentally, I was also at the right height. When my mom was occupied for a moment I left and went to the officer. I didn't even meant to be malicious, but he just happened to stand with his back at me and wasn't aware of me. That is until I grabbed his pistol and tried to get it out of the holster. Was speeding, saw a cop pull out a few cars behind me and knew he was coming for me, so I pulled down a side road into a suburb. He turned down the same road So I pulled into someone's driveway. No idea whose house it was. Seen the cop drive down the road really slow looking at my car. So I got out of the car and acted like I was going into the house, waved at the cop, and he kept on driving. Luckily no one was home, so I got back in my car, waited until the coast was clear, and got the F out of there.